Writing variant equals document ID equals 48271. You sent him where? Headmistress Vera Sorn's voice was calm, but the kind of calm that made the room feel smaller. The clerk at the admissions desk swallowed hard and stared at the glowing transfer file as if it might suddenly change its mind. Predator Academy, ma'am. Human exchange placement. Authorized by Central Education, stamped, signed, and routed this morning. For a long second, nobody spoke. Then the glass doors slid open again, and Mason Carter stepped inside with a plain duffel bag over one shoulder and a paper coffee cup in his hand like he had just walked into a community college and not the most brutal school in the Orion sector. He was white, lean, dressed in a wrinkled navy jacket, and looked more tired than scared, which somehow bothered the predators around him even more. One of the cadets near the wall let out a low laugh. "That's the human," he said, showing a row of sharp teeth. "They sent us a meal by mistake?" Mason stopped, took one slow sip of coffee, and looked at him without blinking. "I'm hoping this place has better breakfast than the airport did," he said. The joke landed nowhere. The laughter around the room got awkward, then meaner. A taller cadet with scar tissue across his jaw stepped forward and circled Mason like he was sizing up a stray animal. "Name's Ray's Core," he said. "You walk soft, you talk soft, and you smell like bad decisions. You sure you're in the right building?" Mason glanced at the sign above the academy crest, then back at Ray's. "Pretty sure," he said, "unless this is where they hide the people who never learned how to mind their own business." A few of the younger cadets shifted and snickered. Ray's eyes narrowed. Vera lifted one hand, and the room went still. She descended the steps from her platform in slow, measured strides, her expression carved from ice. Up close, she was all sharp angles and authority, the kind of leader who never had to raise her voice because everyone else had already learned to be afraid of it. "Human Carter," she said, "do you understand where you are?" Mason set his coffee on the desk, adjusted the strap of his duffel, and nodded once. "Looks like I'm in the wrong place," he said. "But I also know what a transfer error looks like, and I know when somebody thinks they can make a joke out of it." That got her attention. Vera studied him for a beat too long, expecting fear, anger, pleading, anything easy. Instead, she found the same thing she would later hate most about him: restraint. Not weakness. Control. "You will follow academy law," she said. "You will obey your instruct. By the time the first bell hit the academy halls, everybody had already decided what Mason Carter was. The upper-class cadets called him a paperwork mistake. The instructors called him a liability. Rays called him lunch if nobody was paying attention. Mason did not say much about any of it. He just followed the posted schedule, walked the gray stone corridors with his coffee gone cold in his hand, and kept noticing things other people ignored. The cameras were not evenly spaced. The exits were not for emergencies, they were for containment. The training floor below was built like a stage where somebody expected humiliation to happen often enough to deserve a better view. He noticed all of that before he even reached the orientation chamber. "Human Carter," a sharp voice said behind him. Mason turned and saw Nina Brooks, a cadet with dark hair tied back tight and a med patch clipped to her sleeve. She was smaller than most of the others, not weaker, just careful in a place that rewarded the opposite. "You are either very brave or very lost," she said. Mason gave a tired half-smile. "My money is on lost." Nina looked at his file slate, then at his face. "That might be the smartest thing you have said since you got here." Before Mason could answer, the academy doors groaned open and the class filed in. Vera stood at the front, motionless, like the whole building had been built around her voice and not the other way around. Reyes took the center row on purpose, spreading his arms across the bench behind him like he owned the room. "Today," Vera said, "we begin with instinct." A low murmur ran through the cadets. She did not raise her voice. She never had to. "Every predator knows how to chase," she went on. "What separates the strong from the dead is control. Humans are said to have very little of it. We will test that claim." A screen behind her lit up with a schematic of the Academy's subterranean trial course. Narrow corridors, shifting walls, moving platforms, noise triggers, pressure changes. The sort of place that was designed to make confidence fall apart in public. "Your objective is simple," Vera said. "Cross the course. Recover the marked token. Return intact. Those who fail will learn what failure feels like." Reyes leaned back and smiled at Mason as if he had been handed a gift. Nina muttered under her breath, "Do not let him pull you into his game." Mason nodded once. He was already staring at the schematic. The pattern looked chaotic at first, but not random. There was a rhythm to it, a habit. Somebody had built this course to punish brute force and reward patience, which meant the academy had been teaching the wrong lesson on purpose. One by one, the cadets descended into the course. Shouts echoed through the stone. Mechanical panels slammed. Footsteps pounded overhead. Then the room went quiet for Mason, because his turn had come. Vera looked down at him from the platform. "Human Carter," she said, "your excuse for existing is about to be tested." Mason set his shoulders, met her stare, and stepped toward the entry gate. He did not look frightened. He looked ready to find out exactly how much damage a calm man could do to a place built for monsters. The gate opened. The lights inside turned red. And somewhere deep in the academy, something mechanical shifted out of place for the first time. Writing variant equals document ID equals 91374. Mason stepped into the red-lit corridor, and the gate sealed behind him with a heavy thud that sounded final enough to make a lesser man hesitate. The air inside the trial course felt warmer, tighter, like the whole place was holding its breath and waiting for him to make a mistake. Somewhere above the walls, hidden speakers crackled to life, and Vera's voice rolled through the chamber. "Proceed." That was all she said. No encouragement, no warning, just a single cold command. Mason moved forward anyway, one careful step at a time, and the first thing he noticed was that the floor was slightly uneven near the left wall. Not dangerous by itself, but enough to throw off anybody trying to sprint. He glanced up and caught the shape of a shifting panel overhead, then a second one farther down the corridor. This was not a maze built to test strength. It was built to test panic. A few seconds later, the first cadet behind him charged ahead with a roar, only to slam into a moving barrier that slid down from the ceiling and cut the passage in half. The others cursed, shuffled, and started arguing at once. Mason did not. He kept his eyes moving, found the rhythm in the mechanism, and timed his steps to the space between each shift. "He is actually reading the course." Nina's voice crackled faintly through the comm panel near the entrance, as if she could not help herself. "That is not supposed to be the point." Ray shot back from somewhere farther back in the line. His tone was sharp, irritated already. Mason heard both of them, but he stayed focused on the corridor in front of him. A low hum built in the walls. Then the lights changed, and 3 narrow side passages opened at once. One of them was a trap. He did not know which one yet, but he knew the academy well enough after one day to trust the wrong kind of silence. He crouched, looked at the dust line near the floor, and chose the middle passage because it had the cleanest disturbance pattern. The decision was made in less than 2 seconds. No drama, no speech, just a man trusting his eyes more than his nerves. The passage angled downward into a chamber full of hanging rods that swayed at different speeds, each one brushing the air with a faint metallic hiss. Across the room, a bright marker pulsed above a narrow ledge. That had to be the token. Mason exhaled slowly and started through. His jacket snagged once. He caught himself before the motion could throw him off balance. Halfway ACR. The moment Nina said, "Look up," Mason did exactly that, and what he saw made the back of his neck go tight. Above the trial chamber, behind the glass catwalks and maintenance rails, a row of warning lights had come on in a pattern that did not belong to the exercise. Red, then amber, then red again, faster this time, like the building itself had started to panic. A harsh tone rolled through the academy, low and flat, and every cadet in the room froze for half a second before all of them started talking at once. "That is not part of the course," Nina said, her voice suddenly sharp. Mason looked from the lights to Vera. For the first time since he had walked in the front door, she was not calm. She was already moving. "Clear the floor," she snapped. "Now." Reyes turned toward her, confused and annoyed at the same time. "What is happening?" "I said move," Vera barked, and the room obeyed before his pride could argue with it. The floor plates beneath the course were shifting again, but this time it was not a challenge test. It was real. One of the side doors had slid open on the upper level, and a maintenance drone, the size of a small refrigerator, was hanging halfway out of the hatch with its stabilizers sparking. Its scanner eye swept across the room in quick, nervous pulses, then locked on the cluster of cadets below. That drone is not on the registered inventory, Nina said, already backing away. Mason noticed the same thing she did. It was old, not ancient, but patched together from at least 3 different systems, which meant somebody had hidden it here on purpose. Not a drill, not a coincidence. Vera was speaking into her wrist communicator now, her jaw set hard enough to crack stone. Seal the west corridor. Cut power to the lower access. I want a full lockdown. The answer came back in static. Then a second alarm joined the first. Mason did not wait to find out what else was coming. He moved toward the nearest control panel, scanned the layout, and saw the problem instantly. The drone had triggered a partial systems cascade. If the chamber doors locked at the wrong time, half the cadets on the floor could get trapped on the wrong side of the exit. Nina, he said, pointing once. That panel. Can you override it? She looked at him, surprised that he had not wasted time asking questions. Maybe, she said. Maybe is enough, Mason answered. Ray scoffed from across the room. You are following a human? I am following the person who noticed the problem first, Nina shot back. Mason reached the panel and ripped off the protective cover with one hard pull. He was not stronger than the predators in the room, not by their standards, but he was faster than hesitation. His eyes flicked across the symbols. Not English, but the logic was simple enough. Emergency seal. Pressure release. Manual override. He slapped the switch for the west corridor, then held the backup latch open just long enough for the younger cadets to get through. One by one, they stumbled into the safer hallway as the drone drifted lower, its stabilizers whining louder and louder. Vera saw exactly what Mason was doing. Her expression changed, just slightly. Not approval. Not yet. But recognition. The kind that comes when somebody who was supposed to fail starts solving the problem before everybody else has even accepted it exists. Human Carter, she called. Can you disable it? Mason did not look back. His hand was already on the maintenance keypad. Maybe, he said, and Nina actually laughed once, breathless and nervous, because she understood the joke in his answer. The drone jolted again overhead, and a side hatch on its underside clicked open, spilling a cloud of training foam across the floor like a warning. The room went dead silent for one beat. Then Mason glanced up, saw the next move before it happened, and stepped forward with the same steady calm he had worn from the moment he entered the academy. Whatever this thing was, it had not come here by accident. And somebody in this building was about to find out that the human they had dropped into the wrong place was already standing exactly where he needed to be. Writing variant equals document ID equals 60248. Mason kept his hand on the keypad and his eyes on the drone, but the building had already changed the rules. The lights above the chamber flickered once, then steadied into a dull emergency glow that made everybody look a little more tired and a little less brave. Nina was at the panel beside him, breathing fast, her fingers moving over the controls with the kind of focus that came from being smarter than the room expected. I am not getting full access, she said. Something is blocking the manual override from the north stack. Mason nodded without looking away from the drone. Then it is not a random failure. Vera heard that from across the chamber and turned her head. Explain, she said. Mason finally glanced at her. A random failure does not hide itself behind 3 locked systems and a dead-end safety relay. That got a quiet reaction from the room. Cadets who had been calling him a mistake a minute ago were now staring at the drone like it had personally offended them. Ray's crossed his arms. So what? Somebody planted it. Mason shrugged once. Looks that way. Vera's eyes narrowed. She was no fool. Who would sabotage my academy? Mason gave her a look that said the answer was probably obvious and unpleasant. Somebody who wants to prove your predators are not as in control as they think. For the first time, the room went still in the real way. Not the polite kind. The kind where people start thinking about consequences. A burst of static crackled from the drone. Then a flat synthetic voice came through the speaker array overhead. Security event detected. Instructor confirmation required. Nina looked up fast. That is not Academy software. No, Mason said. It is trying to sound official. Vera stepped closer to the chamber floor, her gaze fixed on the machine. Can you shut it down? She asked. Mason tested the keypad again. Nothing. The system had locked out manual access the moment the drone crossed the threshold. Not from here. Ray's finally uncrossed his arms and moved toward them, annoyance written all over his face. Then tell us what you need. Mason looked at him for half a second. Reyes looked genuinely offended by being useful, which almost made Nina smile. I need the north stack opened, Mason said. And I need someone who knows this building better than I do. Vera answered immediately. You have me. That surprised more than one cadet. Mason did not show it, but he respected the speed of her answer. She was not asking whether she should trust him. She was asking whether he could keep up. Then the north stack, Mason said. If somebody is feeding this thing from there, I want to know what they are protecting. Nina swallowed. That section is supposed to be storage and maintenance. Mason gave her a dry look. That is usually what people say right before you find out it is not. Vera pointed toward the upper access ramp. Reyes, with me. Brooks, stay on the panel. Carter, if you are wrong, I will remember it. Mason picked up the marker token he had earned only minutes earlier and slid it into his jacket pocket like it belonged there. Would not be the first time, he said, and that earned him the smallest flicker of a reaction from her that was not quite a smile, but close enough to matter. They moved out fast, not running, just committed. The corridor outside the trial chamber was louder now, with distant alarms echoing through the stone and heavy doors sealing one level after another. Mason followed Vera up the narrow service stair while she keyed open a hatch at the landing. The north stack smelled like dust, old metal, and something faintly burnt. A single light was on at the far end of the hall. Under it sat a maintenance terminal with its cover half open, wires exposed, and a small Academy crest sticker peeled back, as if somebody had rushed to hide the work. Mason crouched beside it, ran his fingers along the panel edge, and looked at the tiny black transmitter clipped behind the housing. There, he said. That is your problem. Vera stared at the device, then at the peeled seal. Someone inside my staff did this. Mason stood up slowly. Looks like somebody wants this academy to fail for a very specific reason. From behind them, down the hall, a door clicked open that should have stayed locked. And then another. Vera turned first. Mason turned right after her. Whatever had been waiting in the north stack was no longer waiting. : writing variant equals document ID equals 71492. The first door to the north stack opened with a long metallic sigh, and Mason felt the mood in the hallway change before he even saw who was coming through it. Vera went still beside him, one hand lifted, her eyes locked on the opening as if she already knew the shape of the trouble and hated being right. Nina was still on the comm from the chamber below, her voice crackling through the static. Mason, the system just rerouted 3 more doors. That was not me. I know, Mason said quietly, watching the shadows move beyond the threshold. Reyes had stepped half a pace behind Vera, all the arrogance gone from his face now. That alone told Mason this was worse than a school prank. A figure emerged from the dark wearing academy gray, not a cadet but staff, with a key ring on one hip and a calm, practiced smile that did not reach his eyes. Instructor Talon Voss. Mason had seen him once during intake, standing near the observation deck with his arms folded like he enjoyed watching people fail. Now he looked almost disappointed to have been caught. Headmistress, Voss said, smooth as polished glass. You were not supposed to reach this corridor so quickly. Vera's voice dropped. Explain yourself. Voss lifted both hands in a gesture that was supposed to look harmless. It did not. I am correcting a weakness in the academy, he said. Your reputation has become too soft, too accommodating. The predators in this building are being taught restraint before they have earned dominance. Nina's voice cut back and over the comm. Mason, he is inside the faculty network. He has access to the upper lockouts. Mason looked from Voss to the half-open maintenance terminal and saw it clearly now. The sabotage was not random. This was a message. Someone had used the incident to prove a point. And the point was ugly. You used the drone to force a lockdown, Mason said. Voss smiled at him as if he had finally said something useful. The drone was only meant to stress the students. A little fear, a little confusion, a little honesty. You cannot train predators in comfort. Reyes took a step forward. You trapped us in here? Voss turned to him with the kind of patience adults used on children they expected to obey. I put you in a situation where the strong would rise and the weak would reveal themselves. Mason felt that sentence land across the whole hallway. It was not just arrogance. It was a philosophy, the kind that turned cruelty into a lesson and called it leadership. Vera's jaw tightened. You did this without authorization. I did what this academy was built to do, Voss replied. You are making it too safe for outsiders. Too many rules. Too much sympathy. He looked directly at Mason then, and his smile sharpened. And this one is the best proof. A human in the predator wing. A transfer error that should have been corrected by noon. Mason did not move. He had learned something useful in the last few minutes. Voss was not trying to hide the sabotage anymore. He was proud of it. He wanted the fear. He wanted the room to split into strong and weak, winners and losses, so he could point and call it truth. You think I am the problem? Mason asked. Voss's answer was instant. I think you are an inconvenience. And inconveniences disappear. The hallway alarms changed pitch. That was the sound Mason had heard in the trial chamber before the drone appeared. Another door opened somewhere deeper in the stack, and a second staff seal flashed red across the wall terminal. Vera saw it too. What did you open? She demanded. For the first time, Voss looked almost pleased. Something you should have checked long ago. Behind him, down the hall, a heavy inner hatch began to rise. Cool air rushed out first, then the faint mechanical hum of a room that had been sealed for a reason. Mason glanced once at the opening, then back at the instructor, and, the moment the inner hatch rose, Mason knew everyone in the hallway had gone one breath too still. The air that came out of the opening was cold and dry, carrying the clean metallic smell of a room that had been sealed long enough for dust to settle in perfect layers. Vera stepped forward first, but Mason caught the faint shift in her posture, the tiny delay before one foot moved, and understood she was not walking into this blind. Nobody was. They were all waiting to see what Instructor Voss thought was worth hiding. The room beyond was not a classroom, not a storage bay, and not a repair corridor either. It was a private training chamber lined with old monitors, black padded flooring, and tall glass cabinets filled with academy records. In the center sat a freestanding console with a live network feed open on the display, and on that screen Mason saw names, incident notes, disciplinary logs, and transfer files arranged in neat rows like somebody had been collecting problems instead of solving them. Nina came back through the comm loud enough for everyone to hear. Mason, I am seeing unauthorized archive access from this room. That would be because he opened it, Mason said. Voss did not bother denying it. He moved farther inside, hands behind his back now, as if this were his own office and not a trap he had just unsealed in front of the headmistress. You want to know what I opened? He said. A history lesson. Vera's voice was low enough to sound dangerous. You will not speak in riddles. Voss turned, smiling at her with the calm certainty of a man who believed he had already won. Then let me be plain. This academy has become weak because you keep protecting the students from the truth. Predators do not learn by being coddled. They learn by being forced to adapt. The human was a mistake, yes, but a useful one. He is proof that your current system is soft. Mason glanced at the display and noticed something that made his stomach go tight. The archive was not just old. It had been edited. Entire entries were marked red, then replaced with revised assessments. Incidents that should have led to immediate review had been quietly buried. Students had been pushed, isolated, and tested in ways the public records did not show. Voss had not been toughening them up. He had been shaping them. You have been staging failures, Mason said. Voss gave him a look that bordered on amusement. I have been separating the ones with teeth from the ones who only pretend. Reyes, who had followed them into the chamber, looked at the monitors and then at Voss. For the first time since Mason had met him, there was no swagger left in his face. You let the younger cadets think they were failing on their own, he said. Voss answered without hesitation. And now they know how easily they break. That hit harder than Mason expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest in the ugliest possible way. He could see now what Voss wanted. Not a stronger academy. A more obedient one. A place where fear could be dressed up as discipline and cruelty could be called preparation. This is not training, Vera said. Her voice had gone flat, which made it worse. This is sabotage. Voss shrugged slightly. Call it what you want. The result is the same. The weak leave. The strong survive. Mason looked back at the open archive and saw one more file highlighted at the bottom of the list. His own transfer record. It had been opened, copied, and then flagged with a private note from Voss only minutes after he arrived. The note was short. Human remains stable under pressure. Potential disruptive variable. Monitor closely. Mason felt the room shift around that sentence. He was not a mistake anymore. He was a variable. And Voss had been planning for that from the beginning. You knew who I was the moment I walked in, Mason said. And you still let them mock me. Voss smiled again, but this time it was thinner. Of course I did. I wanted to see how long you would stay quiet. Nina inhaled sharply over the comm. Mason, his file just triggered a secondary access route. He is pulling something from the lower vault. Vera turned toward the far wall, where a second panel had started to glow faint blue beneath the dark metal casing. Voss finally lost his patience, and the first real crack in his comm was almost more alarming than anger. No more questions, he said, moving toward the panel. This is where the Academy proves what it is for. Mason stepped forward at the same time, not fast, not dramatic, just enough to stop the room from becoming Voss's alone. And when the lower vault door started to open, nobody in the hallway knew yet that whatever was inside had not been kept there to protect the students. It had been kept there to protect a lie. Mason did not move away from the lower vault door when it started to open. He only shifted his weight, kept his eyes on Voss, and watched the instructor's confidence thin out for the first time since this all began. The panel slid upward with a soft hydraulic hum, and behind it was not a weapons cache, not a secret monster, and not another trap. It was a clean white chamber with a single round table, a wall display, and a bank of old sealed files stacked in neat metal drawers like somebody had been protecting history instead of hiding a crime. Nina's voice came through the comm, lower now, almost stunned. Mason, I am reading restricted founder archives. Vera stepped into the chamber first, her expression hardening the second she saw the room. This was never in the public academy map, she said. Voss stopped in the doorway, and Mason caught the smallest flicker of panic in his face before he buried it again. Of course it was not public, Voss said. This wing is for classified oversight. Vera turned slowly toward him. Oversight from who? The answer did not come from Voss. It came from the wall display, which flickered to life on its own as if the chamber had been waiting for exactly this moment. A recorded face appeared on the screen, older, sharp-eyed, and tired in the way only honest leaders usually are. Headmistress Sorn, the recording said, if you are watching this, then the Academy has already been compromised. Mason looked at Vera, then at Voss, and understood at once that the room was about to tell a story neither of them wanted heard out loud. The recording continued, showing a sealed file titled Human Integration and Predator Wing Safety Protocols. Mason stared at the words for a beat. Human, integration, safety. None of them sounded like a trap. This academy was built after the Meridian incident, the recorded voice said. The original Predator trainees were too strong, too impulsive, and too proud to operate in mixed-species environments without supervision. The purpose of the academy was never to glorify instinct. It was to teach restraint. Voss went rigid. That was the first real crack Mason had seen in him. Vera's eyes narrowed. You told the students the opposite. Because they needed discipline. Voss snapped, and the calm was gone now. Not sentiment. The recording kept going. Any staff member who uses this wing to alter records, stage failures, or manipulate students for personal doctrine is to be removed from command immediately. Nina let out a soft, stunned breath over the comm. He has been editing the founder files. Mason finally looked at the archive drawers and saw it all line up. The drone, the lockdown, the fake emergency. The way Voss had tried to turn every test into proof that weakness deserved punishment. He had not just been running the academy. He had been rewriting its purpose. Vera turned to Mason, and for the first time her voice held something close to regret. Your transfer was not supposed to happen like this, she said. It was flagged as a clerical error. Mason gave a short nod. That part one believe. Her jaw tightened. I requested a review the moment your file crossed my desk. Someone blocked it before I could confirm the route. Voss laughed once, but it sounded sharp and empty. And there it is. The human gets sympathy, the students get lectures, and the academy gets softer by the day. Mason looked at him steadily. No, he said. The academy gets exposed. That landed. Even Reyes, standing just behind the others now, said nothing. He was staring at the archive display like a person realizing the ground beneath him had been lying for years. Voss backed a step toward the doorway, but the chamber locks had already clicked shut behind him. The display changed again, this time showing transfer logs, access codes, and one final line highlighted in red. Unauthorized override entered from faculty terminal. Source confirmed, Instructor Talon Voss. Vera inhaled slowly, then pointed at the screen. You are finished. Voss looked from her to Mason, and the arrogance returned only enough to mask the fear underneath. No, he said. Not yet. Then the wall lights cut out. Every archive drawer in the chamber unlocked at once, and the entire lower vault chimed with a sound Mason had not heard since he entered the academy. The alert tone of a system about to tell the truth to everyone at once. The alarm tone rolled through the lower vault like a bell nobody could ignore, and then the entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. The archive drawers stood open along the white walls, each one glowing with a soft blue strip of light, and on the central display the truth started to spill out in layers that no one in the room could talk over anymore. Transfer logs, access history, edited disciplinary reports, hidden safety complaints, old incident reviews that had been buried, not lost. Nina was the first to speak, her voice shaking with disbelief. He was rewriting everything. Vera did not look away from the screen. Yes, she said, and the single word carried more weight than any speech she had given since Mason arrived. Talon Voss stood in the doorway with his jaw tight, trying to keep his posture proud while the evidence lined up against him with cruel precision. The display showed his access codes, then his overrides, then the trail of files he had used to turn the academy into a private experiment. Ray stared at it for several long seconds, then finally let out a low breath. All this time, he said, more to himself than anyone else. You made us think it was us. Mason looked at him and saw something important shift there. Not weakness, something better. Humility, the kind that stings when it arrives, because it always comes after the truth. Vera stepped forward and keyed open the central archive, her hand steady now. This academy was built to teach control, she said, and her voice was not loud, but the room listened anyway. Not fear, not cruelty, not whatever you decided to call strength. She turned to the cadets gathered behind Mason, to Nina, to Reyes, to every student who had been trained to think suffering was the same thing as growth. A predator without restraint is not powerful. It is predictable. Nobody moved. Even the ventilation in the chamber sounded too loud. Then the screen changed again, this time displaying the original founder message in full, not the edited version Voss had hidden. The old recording repeated the same truth in a calmer voice than Mason expected. The academy existed to teach dangerous species how to live beside one another without turning every difference into a threat. That was the part Voss had tried to erase. Mason felt something settle in his chest that he had not realized was tense since the moment he walked through the front door. He had been treated like an error, a joke, a test, and a warning. Now the room knew better. Voss finally tried one last move, lifting his chin and speaking like a man still expecting the room to bend around him. You cannot build a real academy on mercy, he said. Vera answered without looking at him. This is not mercy. She pointed once at the archive. This is honesty. Then she keyed her communicator and sent the lockdown order through every level of the building. Not to trap people, to clear the channels, to bring every faculty member, every instructor, every student into the same truth at the same time. The alarm softened. The lights came back on. And for the first time since Mason arrived, nobody in the Predator Academy was pretending that fear made them strong. Voss was removed from command before the hour was out. The edited records were restored. The students who had been made to feel small stood a little straighter, not because they had been toughened by cruelty, but because the lie that had weighed on them was finally gone. As for Mason, he was no longer the human who had been sent to the wrong place. He was the one who had walked into a broken system, refused to break with it, and exposed the rot everyone else had learned to live with. When he reached the front steps of the academy that evening, Nina fell into step beside him and said, "You know they are going to talk about this for years." Mason glanced at the dark sky over the campus and gave a small, tired smile. Good, he said. Maybe next time somebody sends a human somewhere by mistake, they will think twice before calling it harmless. And behind them, through the tall glass doors of the academy, a whole building full of predators was learning a lesson they would not forget. The strongest thing a person can do is stay steady long enough for the truth to catch up.